Hi, it's January 2021 and this is the latest episode of Built from Scratch. I've got a few changes to talk about and I'll get to that in a minute, but one of the changes is that I'm going to be starting off every episode of Built from Scratch from now on by jumping straight into the income report and the traffic report. So for this month, the income has been absolutely zero. And if you've been watching these videos already, this won't come as too much of a surprise to you. Who knows when that's going to change. Hand in hand with that is traffic. It has kind of also been zero itself, although that's not literally true. And for the first time a couple of days ago, I did actually spend half an hour or so looking at Google Analytics just to get an idea, for fun really, because it doesn't mean a lot at the moment, but just to get an idea of the data that has been captured around traffic. So what I can tell you about the international site's traffic, so that's the .site domain, is that it's had 188 sessions since it began, which is absolutely nothing given that that was several months ago. But it's not literally nothing, and therefore I was able to look at a couple of bits. Specifically the geographical location of those people who had a look at the site. I was interested in that because of the implementation of the hreflang tags. They affect where the site should be relatively visible in the world, so I was interested to know how that was working out. The answer is a little bit strange, because it turns out at the moment 50% of the visits to the site are coming from France, which really should not be the case, bearing in mind it's not a .fr site. It should be aimed more at the English speaking parts of the world. However, of the remaining countries that people have visited from, the United States was the second highest, which is what you would expect. And then the UK was next after that, and then a couple of others that made sense. So I'm kind of hoping that means the site structure is having the right kind of effect, and I'm hoping that the French thing is just some weird quirk that's cropped up, I guess because I must have written something on one of the pages in French, or I really don't know how that's happened, to be honest, and I don't have any data on the queries that people have been using to find the site, so I've got no way of figuring that out anymore. But with a data set as small as this one, you can get weird quirks very easily. So for now, I'm not unhappy. It kind of looks like it's working okay, and I'm hoping that when I start getting up into having a few thousand hits, then the disproportionate number of French people looking at the site will have just disappeared. Not that I don't like French people, it's just I don't think they're ever going to be buying my products or services, so you know. The traffic for the .co.uk site was showing 144 sessions over the same time period, so noticeably higher in terms of hits per capita. If you take the per capita number as being the number of people that live in the UK, obviously people in other countries can find this site, but it's relatively unlikely that they will do so. And that is borne out by the fact that around 60% of the visits to that site have come from the United Kingdom. The second largest, again slightly peculiarly, were from Portugal. I don't know why that would be, but it was mostly the UK, so that makes sense. And that was about it really for analysing the traffic. I also looked in Google Search Console, primarily there just to see if I could get any search queries. For the international site, there was no data at all for queries. I imagine I'll have to start getting quite a few more hits before I start getting anything there. There was, however, a little bit of data for the .co.uk. There were 3 queries it was showing as the site having been found for, and they were all to do with canonicalization or hreflangs, or the comparison that I did, well not the comparison, the stuff that I said about top level domains versus country code domains. So I don't know, I guess that's not actually particularly interesting at this stage. I suppose it shows that probably the titles I wrote for those articles were, and I didn't do this on purpose, but they were probably slightly more kind of key phrasey than the ones that I'd written on the other articles, which were just like pure natural language stuff that I was saying. I can't imagine the people who found those articles, who were searching for those kind of things, were actually particularly satisfied by my content, because if they're searching for technical bits and pieces like that, they were probably wanting a bit of a how-to, and that's not what these are. But anyway, whatever. Regardless of all that, it was kind of cool to see just the very beginnings of a little bit of data coming in, and I'm excited for when the site starts building up the numbers a little bit to get some more useful, meaningful, interesting data in. So that's the end of the income and traffic report. Now I'm going to tell you what I've actually been up to since I made the last of these videos. And the first thing I've got to mention is that it's been about 2 months, in fact more than 2 months now, since I made the last built from scratch video, and that is for 2 reasons. The first reason, which accounts for about the first 4 and a bit weeks out of that time period, is that firstly, I think it was the day after I made the last episode, I just decided I was actually going to put this whole thing down for a little while and concentrate on getting our house sorted. As I've mentioned a couple of times before, we were having a large extension built on the house, and it's taken up quite a lot more of my time, even though I'm nothing to do with the building of it, than I thought it would. And that impact on my work time was growing and growing over the few days prior, and I just decided to put this down and actually get stuck in, because the builders had got to the point where they were needing a little, well, they weren't needing my help with anything, but it was getting very close to the Christmas holidays, and they were kind of struggling to wrap things up in time. So I spent 3 or 4 days being the person who would run around and get parts for them or return things if they needed returning, essentially doing anything I could to try and speed things up a little bit. Which worked, because they got it done in time for Christmas, and what that meant was I actually had a few days before Christmas to work on getting the new rooms actually set up with furniture and a little bit of tidying up done. So that took a little while, and then it was into the actual Christmas holidays, which was a couple of weeks, and then me and my wife had a couple of days after that as well, when the kids had gone back to nursery, just doing more stuff on the house. So that was about 4.5 weeks gone, and then then there's quite a substantial different second reason. The second reason has to begin with me pointing out that I did mention, I believe, at the start of this whole process, that I would be talking about my failures as much as my successes. In fact, quite possibly more. Well, at this point, I'm going to admit that probably absolute minimum 50% of the work that I have done on Wave to the so far has been a mistake. And that's essentially because of what you're watching right now. I have spent a lot of time making videos, learning how to make them, learning how to process them, post them online, turn them into podcasts, all that kind of stuff. And it hasn't just been the Built From Scratch series. As I mentioned in the last episode, I also made a couple of bits of content. One, how to make a projector with a magnifying glass, and the other, how to make a projector without a magnifying glass, both of which were not primarily written. They were based around videos themselves, albeit I have now written articles to go with them. The problem with all of that is I'm now about 6 months into this project, about 4.5 months in if you strip out time that I've not been working, which is still a big chunk of time, and I've got very little to show for it, or almost nothing of kind of direct commercial value. Now, In fairness, the point of doing this from the start was to build up a website with some content on it and build it up to a point where it can be monetized and it can become commercially viable. So I'm not berating myself for the fact that I've put some time and effort into building some foundations. That's fine. But I did not mean to spend anything like this amount of time building those foundations. And what makes it worse is that whilst I am still genuinely hopeful that the Built From Scratch series can end up earning me a bit of interest and a bit of inbound links, I think that even if it does, and even if I really try and push it to do that, the payoff, the ratio of links and general interest to effort expended so far will not be great under any circumstances. In documenting this fail, I've also got to throw in the fact that of the time I've spent so far, not all of it has been messing around with videos. There's also been a fair chunk of time I've spent on the site structure, the two sites, how I'm, the time it took to make the decision to do that, and then the time it took to learn how to have two sites and differentiate them, and then various things in WordPress that I've had to learn to make it function properly. I think those things potentially add a lot more value than the time that I've spent learning how to work with video, but the fact is that has been more of a time drain, and again it hasn't been to do with actually producing something of direct value, which would mean writing articles that people find and come to and which I can monetize with adverts or affiliate links or whatever. So that really does amount to an awful lot of work that so far hasn't created any value at all. So these things amount to the second reason why it's been a big delay since I last made this video, because I think I got back to work after the Christmas holiday on around the 3rd or 4th of January, and I'm making this on the 25th of January, and I still haven't got to the point where I've been able to put video and site setup aside and actually start working on basic written content, which is, it's verging on disastrous, to be honest. Had I ended up, well, if at this point in the project I only had the cash for paying for life, life stuff that I thought I was going to have at the start of the project, I'd pretty much be out of money at this point, and I'd have to go and get a job, and I would be incredibly annoyed with myself for having not put some more fundamental stuff in place. As it is, as previously mentioned, my family got a substantial tax rebate back a few months ago, which we weren't expecting. In hindsight, we should have been, but whatever. We got the money, and that is now kind of funding this attempt further. So the good news is I actually have at least, I'm not even going to put a number on it anymore because things fluctuate a bit too much, but certainly quite a few more months to get on with this. But I'm not going to allow myself to relax and not hate myself for the time that I have arguably wasted so far, because having that stuck in my head that I have messed up and I've taken some bad decisions is the only thing that's going to take my admittedly naturally kind of somewhat unfocused mind and hopefully kick it into gear and keep me on the straight and narrow to spend these next few months doing those things that might actually start generating some income. Anyway, that's the end of the doom and gloom. I'm now going to talk about, the more positive side of this situation. As I kind of just alluded to, one of the positives here is that at least I have learnt a lesson. It was something that I absolutely knew in theory anyway, but unfortunately it turns out I needed a visceral, real life situation to transpire before I could really grasp it, and that is the benefits of specialisation. Because it's not that making these videos is actually inherently bad or not worthwhile, and it's not that the time that I've spent learning a few extra things about web design and web development haven't been worth it. I think all of it is at least potentially worth it. I think I want to kind of put it more strongly than that and say it definitely is worth it as long as you end up putting the supporting effort in. But the problem here has been that I previously knew nothing about video production, and even now I don't know a great deal, and I was only sort of intermediate level with regards to WordPress development. So doing all that work took an extraordinarily huge amount of time compared to what it should have done, really, and that's because I had to learn everything as I was going through it. The thing is, I'm a big fan of learning things. I really enjoy it. That, to be honest, that's kind of what I want to spend my life doing. It's just going about, seeing something that I'm interested in, learning some of it, having a go. That to me is fun. But the problem, of course, is that you need money to get through life, and you don't earn money by being a jack of all trades who's constantly trying out different things. So I am now absolutely determined to specialise. All I am going to do for the foreseeable future is write content, like keyword driven commercial content for the site. I'm going to get good at producing that fairly rapidly, editing it, monetizing it in an appropriate way. I'm going to get good at a couple of methods of promotion or link building or whatever you want to call it. Methods, well, we'll see how we go with that, but I'm probably going to do the things that Authority Hacker suggests in their Authority Hacker Pro course, which essentially means guest posting and using Helper Reporter Out to build links. And then the only other thing I'm going to do is to carry on making the built from scratch videos. And the reason why I can say that without being a total hypocrite is because I have now learnt enough about making these videos to be able to do them really quite quickly and efficiently. And to be honest, even just those 3 things that I've laid out, writing content, building links, and making built from scratch videos, feels like a bit of a stretch in terms of de-specialisation, or whatever the opposite of that is, being a generalist. But obviously when you're working for yourself and you don't have any staff, you do have to wear a few hats, and I think I will be able to do those 3 things in a fairly expert manner once I've spent a little bit of time doing them. So now I'm just going to briefly mention the fact that there have been some good aspects to learning how to use video. Firstly, I did finish those 2 making a projector videos, edited them together, wrote supporting content, and you can now see them live on the site if you would like to do so. So I have a couple of bits of content live which are not built from scratch and not Diary of an Entrepreneur, which feels good. Also, it means that I've now got video and podcasting very much lodged in my brain as things that you can do to support a website. So even if I don't now immediately leverage that knowledge to any greater extent than just production of built from scratch, that's fine. It's not going to disappear out of my head as a useful thing. So even if it's a year to 5 years from now that I get to a point where I've got the resources to get people to help me put some different and better and more efficiently produced videos together, that's fine. I will remember to do so at the relevant point. Also, I've kind of mentioned this already, but I have learned to do these videos so efficiently that I'm going to carry on doing it, and I do still believe that the Built From Scratch series is ultimately going to have some value. So in the long run, as long as I keep producing them in an efficient manner, then perhaps at some distant point in the future I might look at the total amount of time it's taken me to put them together versus the hopefully increasing benefit it's brought, and decide that it was kind of worth it. Similarly to that bit of positivity around video production, the stuff I was saying about having sunk some time into the setting up of the sites is not a bad thing. It has a huge positive aspect to it, which is that I am now genuinely confident that I have set the sites up to perform well in Google. Time will tell, but I do believe that I now know what I'm doing in terms of what I'm going to write, how it's going to be organised on the site, how the two sites interoperate to the extent that they do, and I believe we're going to get some good rankings out of that. We'll obviously review that as the months go by. I would like to think half a year or so from now we're going to start getting some good data and see if I'm correct. One thing I want to mention just at this point, having spoken about all that craziness, the time it's taken for me to learn this stuff and do it, I just want to acknowledge that I'm sort of coming at this project from the context of the various communities that exist around people with jobs wanting to set up websites and side hustles and trying to earn money and essentially migrate into a life of running online businesses and making a living that way. So I'm talking about Authority Hacker and Niche Pursuits and Side Hustle Nation and Empire Flippers and a whole bunch of other content outlets, businesses, groups of people who are interested in this sort of thing. And because of the type of people that are interested in setting themselves up in this way, I just want to make a point and say that anyone out there who has managed to actually have a full-time job and get anywhere with this sort of thing, with affiliate marketing or advertising on a website or e-commerce or essentially any kind of online business, you have done incredibly well. Even if you only got to the point where you're making whatever, $100 a month. If you've done a 40-hour week and done this with any degree of success, then give yourself a pat on the back. I don't think I could do it. If I'm going to be completely fair to myself, I suppose I have to consider that if I didn't have 40 hours a week, if I just had 5 or 10 hours a week, maybe that limited time would have focused me more and I would have started just with some smaller, more basic stuff. But honestly, knowing what I'm like as a person, I don't know if I would. I think I might have tried to do basically what I've done over these last 6 months, except that it wouldn't have taken me 6 months, it would have taken me a couple of years, and probably at that point I would have given up looking at how little I'd achieved and the fact that I'd earned no money at all. I might have just stopped. So if you've achieved anything like that, well done to you. And also, speaking as a parent, if there's anybody out there who works a full-time job and has kids at home and has somehow still managed to put some time into doing something like this and has earned even $1, then you are a superhero. Because doing this as my full-time job and helping look after kids, that's it for me. That is virtually every hour of every day used up. And you know, if I do get a spare half hour now and then in the evening where I can actually look my wife in the eye and say, I really want to go and do some work now instead of spending this tiny amount of leisure time with you. Well, firstly, as you can probably tell by the way I've built that up, that virtually never happens. And on the odd occasion where it does, I am never focused enough. I never have adequate energy to then sit down and start doing some serious productive work. So if there's anyone out there who's actually done that, well, I mean, you deserve everything that comes to you, and I hope that $1 you've earned, or whatever it is, turns into $1 million, and you get to pack in your job and do whatever the hell you like, because you are incredible. Alright, with that said, I'm actually going to wrap up this episode now by just briefly talking about what I'm planning on doing content-wise now. Because I'm not giving up on the documentation of setting up a business. I still kind of love it, and I still really want to do it, despite the fact that it's drained my resources and will, to some small degree, continue to do so. I just like the idea, and I believe I have now figured out a way of doing it in such a way that it won't destroy or even significantly negatively affect my chances of success. So I'm going to do it in two ways. Firstly, there is the Diary of an Entrepreneur. You may have heard me talk about this already. It's a page on the website, that's the title of it, and it's a written account of what I get up to day by day. It was originally just going to be a fairly short page where I just essentially referred to Built from Scratch. It was just a written way of trying to funnel a few people into these videos, but now it's kind of reversed roles. It's actually going to be the primary place where I document what I do. The reason for that is writing a few short paragraphs per day, which I'm trying to do as the day goes by, so I don't even have to spend a lot of time thinking about it. I just knock out a few lines about what I am about to do or what I've just done. That's not difficult, and it really doesn't take too long. I think over these last couple of weeks that I've been trying to do it, I've probably only spent about, I'm going to say maybe 20 minutes a day doing it, which is not nothing, but it's not too much. And then, as you can probably tell because you're watching one right now, I am definitely going to carry on making Built from Scratch videos, but I'm only going to do them, I think, once a month. So the idea is that there's going to be relatively little of the day-by-day accounts. In fact, there's going to be no actual, on the 3rd of March, this is what I did type content anymore. What I'm going to do is look back on my Diary of an Entrepreneur notes since whenever it was that I last made one of these videos, and then summarise it in relatively brief, lively fashion. I say brief and lively partly because of the obvious. It makes it a quick video to record, so it gets it out of the way and I can move on with normal work again, but also because, having watched back various of the videos I've made so far, I've just come face to face with the fact that the preferences that I have as a person just don't match with what is actually worth creating in terms of video content. And I kind of knew that up front, but there's something different between knowing that something is going to be a certain way beforehand and thinking you're okay with that, and then actually doing it and seeing the time and effort it's taken and the final result, and how you feel about it then. And sorry if that explanation was a bit vague. What I'm trying to say is the videos so far, clearly, as you'll be aware if you watched any of them, are incredibly boring. Nobody's ever going to watch them, and it just makes me realise I don't want to waste any more time making them. And it's not even just about watching them back, it's about making them. I kind of like talking in depth about the stuff that I've been doing, but it can be more fun to just talk briefly about the more fun aspects of what you've been up to. So that's what I'm planning to do from now on. I'm going to summarise what I've been up to over the last few weeks and just tell you more about, I don't know, the bigger themes of the work, or the impact it's had, or the worries I've got, or the emotional sides of things, or whatever crops up that is just perhaps a little more interesting than the day-to-day details of the tasks that I've been doing. And for anyone who is interested in reading that sort of stuff, if, you know, for example, you're interested in setting up a little business of your own, or you're actually trying to do so, and you are wanting to see actually precisely what I've done because it may aid you in some small way, well, that is absolutely going to be there in Diary of an Entrepreneur. So what I'm hoping is, altogether, all parties are served something worthwhile here, and that includes me and those people who want to read the day-to-day stuff, and perhaps a few people out there who might want something a little more kind of an entertaining summary of what a person is trying to do as an entrepreneur. So it will cover all bases, but still won't take a horrifically draining amount of time and energy out of the business itself. So that's it for this episode. I am literally going to edit this together, post it. It's only it's 20 to 1 in the afternoon at the moment, so I think I will actually be getting down to work before the end of the day. I mean, post video production, that is. And that is going to be it for the next several months. Just researching content, writing it, and I guess it might be kind of boring, but it's going to be a necessary boring that's going to make me feel good. So hopefully next video I'm going to be telling you about exactly how boring that's been.